Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with jazz pianist Greg Murphy. His musical adventures began in 1971 when he joined the Ray-Fisk Grammar School Band in Chicago, and that would lead him to his very latest 2016 album in a long, long journey, and it's called Summer Breeze. One of his big moments came in 1984 when he got the National Endowment for the Arts Opportunity Grant to go to New Orleans and study with the great pianist and educator Ellis Marsalis. Since the 80s, he has been big on the New York City jazz scene. He's played with the likes of Branford Marsalis, Joe Lovano, Christian McBride, Terrence Blanchard, Harry Connick Jr., the great Charles McPherson, and so many others. He's got great stories, great insights, and we love his music. So, dig this interview, my friends.
Man, hey, thanks for taking a little time out for me.
Hey, happy to be available.
Right on. So, I know you're a very busy musician, very busy man, but in your own words, I want to start everything off here with kind of a snapshot of sorts of activity that's going on right now, ever present in your world.
Right now, getting ready to go to do some teaching, where I teach piano lessons at a Montessori school in Jersey City, and also preparing for, the various projects that I have going on, like I got a gig at Smalls coming up in 2 weeks on Tuesday, which is a CD release party for my latest CD, which is called Summer Breeze, which is out on Whaling City Sound. And so I've been working that the last couple months since it's been out, just letting people know that it's out there, doing radio promotion, getting airplay. It's been on the charts for the last, 10 weeks. 9 weeks. It's been on the Jazz Week charts, and so I call radio stations. I have a radio promoter. Working in coordination with the record label as far as just reaching out to those guys and seeing if they need CDs for promotion for their fund drives and stuff like that. And trying to keep it going, trying to keep getting some gigs and get some work for my group. Also doing a lot of solo stuff at a restaurant in Staten Island. I play there on a regular basis. I also play Wednesday nights with a group in Harlem at a place on 121st Street, which is my old neighborhood. Doing some things on Thursdays with the Spirit of Life Ensemble coming up, and just trying to stay busy, trying to keep it moving, and find some time to practice and work on some new music and all that stuff.
Very cool, man. Yeah, everything sounds very busy. So Smalls is a pretty hip little place to play, huh?
Yeah, it's a great place. They've developed it over the years. They've done some remodeling. They have some great pianos in there. Spike Wilner has done a great job with that place. They do live streaming. It's become one of the spots. That place and Mesro, which is right down the street. Those are two of the hippest rooms in New York City.
Right on. So Summer Breeze, I caught it on iTunes, caught some tracks, very good album. So I want to ask you this. Kind of take me into the inner workings of how this album was made, and now in the Afterglow with promoting, how do you feel?
I feel good about it. Basically, it started out, if you want a long story, it started out as I was, a friend of mine, Jay Rodriguez, who's a saxophone player, and he's also, does a lot of other things. He told me about the studio he had in Brooklyn. He said, hey, I have this timeshare. It's like a performance space / studio. This place called I-Beam in Brooklyn. I said, come on and record some stuff. So I recorded a couple solo piano pieces, and then he said, you should put this stuff out. You should make an album. And I was like, wow, this is I hadn't done an album in like 10 years before that. Almost 8 years or whatever. And so I decided to think seriously about it. And then I did a fundraising thing with Indiegogo, and then I put the band together, some guys I've been working with, and we did a formal session. I did a solo session, and then we did a group session in Queens at this really nice studio. And so I put that album together and put that out. It's called Blues for Miles, and I put that out on my own label. And then I was speaking with Jerry Gibbs, who because I wanted I know he had a lot of success with radio, with on the Jazz Week charts and stuff like that. So I asked him who was his radio promoter. So he got me in touch with Neil Sapper, and so I did radio promotion for Blues for Miles with Neil Sapper. So I did all that on my own with the help of contributions from Indiegogo. And then I also spoke with Jerry's record label, and he said, "Well, yeah, let me see what your thing sounds like, and maybe we can do something." So I gave him a copy of Blues for Miles. He liked it. And he said, "Okay, put something together. We'll work something out." And I recorded Summer Breeze. I did that session in January, and he liked it, so he put it out, and we put it out in July, and we're still working it, as they say. They have a publicist, and so they send it out to all these places, try to get reviews and stuff like that. So we're still in the process of working that, and of course the label has all sorts of other things. So I'm pleased with the results so far. It's a plus or minus thing, It's sometimes it's I'm really happy about the results or what's going on. The other times it's like a struggle, It's like it's a lot of work involved. So. But I'm really happy. I'm really grateful that people have helped me with this record. I also did an Indiegogo project, and I got some help with that financially. And the record company is also, of course, done a lot to try to get this record out. So it helps. It's just something we have to do. If you're a performing musician, and you have to have a record out.
Right.
Even if it doesn't have to be every year, but at least every once in a while, you got to get something out and try to. It's like these days, they don't necessarily make a lot of money, but it helps. Everything, your performances, whatever you're doing, everything helps the overall aspect of your career, and that's what I'm hoping with this project and all the things that I do. They all help each other, radio interviews like we're doing now, everything, gigs, everything helps the overall scheme, of things,
Yeah, and you're a product, and you got to have a product, so it makes sense. Yeah, there's got to be some kind of tangibility, especially at live gigs. So, you said hopefully it all works out. When you get done with big projects, do you get that clairvoyance to look on the other side of it and say, yeah, you know what, this did work out. This makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I've it helps. It's gotten me more recognition. People bought the record and said, hey, I like the record. It sounds great. And but it's always a work. I always feel like I'm a work in progress. Like, I listen back and say, wow, this could have been better. That could have been better. So it's always, I'm always trying to improve. I'm always trying to, improve in every aspect of my career, whether it's teaching, whether it's performing, whether it's composing, producing, the sound and recording, engineering, all that stuff. I'm always trying to get better, and it's good. It's good to get the feedback from everybody, and just got to keep it moving. That's the main thing.
Yeah. And speaking of movement, let's begin at the beginning here of your movement. You were born in Chicago.
I was born in Newfoundland. I was born in St. John's, Newfoundland, actually.
So were you raised in Chicago?
Yeah, I was raised in Chicago. Yeah, my father was in the service and in the Air Force, and then my mom is from St. John's or from Newfoundland. They met in St. John's, and so I was born there. And when I was 6 months old, my family moved to Chicago.
Okay.
And I grew up in Chicago.
So what was your childhood like to give you this love of music and jazz?
Well, my father was a singer. He had a brief career, and he went on the road a little bit and went on a couple TV shows, and he was a singer and he composed, and he actually put together a record. I think it was a 33, and of some original compositions. He had some local musicians that were pretty good. I think he had Jody Christian, who's a famous Chicago piano player. He had him on the record, and he kind of he had records around the house. I heard Sketches of Spain. I always used to play this record as time goes by. I don't know who it was by, but it was a 33, and I kept playing it. And for some reason that that caught my attention, and eventually I had to learn it, but over the years. But because the owner at the hotel that I work at now, he likes that song, so he likes me to play that song. But so anyway, my father was into music, and I started taking piano lessons as a kid. I heard some of that music. I still, my older brother was, after I'd taken some piano lessons and learned a little bit about music, I was still really not into jazz. I just liked the piano a little bit. And but once I was in high school, I started hearing, because I only took lessons for a couple of years, and then I was hearing, my older brother Mark had a big collection of Beatles records, and he was the record collector, and I was just, I bought a Snoopy record and an Aerosmith record, and I was, into rock and roll and stuff like that, listening to those guys and going to concerts and stuff, and R&B and stuff, from high school. And there was this record that kind of caught my attention, and when my brother would first play it, it sounded like Chinese music to me, and it was Chick Corea. And, there's the old story, that, swing era musicians would listen to Charlie Parker records and say that it sounded like Chinese music. And, I didn't hear that at the time. It just, I didn't understand it. So I was listening to this Return to Forever record. Eventually, it caught on. Eventually, I heard it enough, and it started making sense. And I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. And then I started getting into the fusion, Weather Report, and all of the artists that played with Chick Corea and that played with Weather Report. I would get their albums, Stanley Clark's albums, Lenny White, Alphonse Mazan. So I started getting into the music through fusion, and then I started listening to John Coltrane and Charlie Parker and Miles Davis, and then I started becoming interested in jazz and started seeing how cool it was.
So obviously with your dad being in music and growing up with so much music and playing, was it just something that was in your DNA that you were going to pursue music as a career?
Well, it really didn't happen. I always liked music, but I went to college. I went to Illinois State University to study. I was into sports a lot, so that was really my interest. I was into baseball and hockey. And when I went to Illinois State, I was a computer science major, but I was always tinkling on the piano. I was always just messing around, trying to just play some stuff by ear. And then my mom was getting ready to move to Germany, so she said she was going to sell my piano because, she had to get rid of it. And that's when it hit. When I was at Illinois State University and she said she was going to move and sell my piano, I was like, wow. I don't want, I want to keep that piano. So I went back to Chicago and moved the piano from my mom's house to my brother's house. And so, I had some friends help me move it. So that's when it kind of dawned on me that I wanted to play the piano, when it was getting ready to be taken away. And then I was like, I think I like this thing, because I was practicing at Illinois State, just messing around, but I was into other stuff. But then, after that, then I left college after, 2 years and moved in with my brother, and then I started getting together with these local bands. I had my piano there, and I started doing, rehearsals and getting together with this one band where we rehearsed every day, and then this band called Lightning Flash Thunder Roar, and we had some good gigs in Chicago. We were doing a lot of variety of stuff, but we were one of those bands that rehearsed almost every day, and so we were able to learn a lot of music, and from there, I was always into jazz. We weren't playing much jazz with that band, but I started trying to play more and learn more traditional jazz tunes, more standards and stuff like that. I met Ellis Marsalis as in association with that band. We had an arranger who arranged some of our stuff, and he said, "Hey, this Ellis Marsalis is in town with Winton, and this is in the early '80s when they had just started becoming successful, and they put out that record Fathers and Sons, and they did a tour with that. Fathers and Sons was one side was Ellis Marsalis, Branford and Winton, and some other cats, and then the other side was Von Freeman, Chico Freeman, and George Freeman, I think. And so anyway, Ellis was doing a tour, and so Ellis was at a workshop, and so my friend who was arranging for the LFTR band said, "Hey, you should come out and check these cats out. They're giving a free clinic." So we went to this college, and we saw these guys, and but I mean, we actually missed the workshop. So I was like, okay. So I asked Ellis Marsalis if he would give me a piano lesson, and he said sure. And he came to my house, and gave me a free piano lesson. And this is in like 1984, and super cool of him to do that. He's working at the Blackstone Theater, which was not the Blackstone Theater, Blackstone Hotel. That's where the Jazz Showcase was at the time. He said, come on out to the showcase, and then so we met. I checked out their performance, and he was nice enough to give me a free piano lesson. So from there, he said, why don't you put together an application and try to get an NEA grant to study, come down to New Orleans and study. So Ellis, he was very instrumental in my jazz career because I got the grant, and then I went down there in 85 and studied with him and ended up staying there in New Orleans for like 2.5 years, learning how to play and doing gigs and stuff like that.
That was a big stepping stone before you went to the New York City scene and got involved with what was going on there. So in the 80s, since the 80s, you've been in the New York City scene. What was it like to migrate, not only from what you were doing in Chicago with, the scene and your university work, then New Orleans, then New York? What was that migration in your career like for you?
Well, what happened was, it was basically, for me, it was time to leave New Orleans, in the sense that I knew I wanted to keep playing, but I knew that the opportunities were in New York City. I knew that that's where all the cats were. Those, I just had a sense that was where, you get a chance to play with a lot of musicians and do gigs. So what happened was there was a catalyst that happened when I was living in New Orleans. My equipment, my apartment got broken into, and some of my equipment got stolen, and so I had insurance on it. And so once I got the insurance check, that was, it was like $1,200 or $1,500, and that was it. That was my money to move to New York. So I moved to New York, and immediately I started playing with Rashid Ali, a friend of mine, Tyler Mitchell, who I played with in high school in Chicago. He knew Rashid, and he had also introduced me to Rashid in Chicago a long time ago, and when Rashid was playing with Sun Ra. So he took me over to his house. I was in New York for like maybe 2 weeks or something like that, if that. And I went to Rashid's house, and I, began a long association with Rashid. Went to his house, and I actually broke a couple of his piano keys, and I don't know if he was impressed with that or my playing. He liked something about it. I broke at least 5 of his piano keys because I don't know why, but it was just the tips came off and he had to glue them back on. But I was, I felt I had, to keep up with him, you got to play pretty hard. So yeah. So right away I knew that. But Rashid liked me, and I was fortunate enough to be in a lot of his bands over the years. So he took me on the road, and it was a slow process, but over the years, looking back at it, it was an incredible learning experience, learning on the bandstand, playing, free jazz, playing, structured jazz, straight ahead. He had bands that were primarily, free, but he also had bands that were just exclusively straight ahead, So it was great, and then, and combinations thereof, and so it was a great experience playing with Rashid.
Well, you've also played with, Branford Marsalis, Joe Lovano, Christian McBride. You played with Terrence Blanchard. You played with so many people. What do you learn? What have you learned over the years?
And I have to clarify that because those a lot of people, those like Terrence Blanchard, I just sat in with him at the Vanguard. Same with Branford. Christian McBride, I did a gig with him with Jesse Davis. So it's not like I was in their bands. A lot of these guys I just played with. I was like either played with on a jam session or on a gig somewhere, but so just to clarify that,
Yeah, no.
Joe Lovano, these guys I played with, but not like I wasn't necessarily in their band.
Well, I guess this is my question. Even though you just played with them, what do you learn from veterans those that have been around for a while, and, you know, kind of what do you soak in from being around them?
Well, I mean, those guys have they're in such a comfort zone with their music. You know, it's like everything they do is like natural. I mean, I did like one audition type gig with Art Taylor, and it was like, you know, just playing with him and just, you know, how comfortable he is with what he's doing and his tunes and stuff like that. It's just amazing, you know. I mean, those guys, they, you know, and they all have different styles too. You know, it's like Art Taylor was like, okay, no, that's not the ending to this song. You got to do it like this. This is the rhythm, dot dot da dee diddly deep diddly dot, or whatever it was for the ending of whatever tune we were working on. It was a long time ago. But you know, some guys have very specific concept of what they want, and then other guys they just play. You know, they just play, and if you fit in, you fit in, and if you don't, you don't. You know, so basically, you know, just these guys are masters. You know, Art Taylor and you know, Terrence and Christian McBride. You know, even back then, and when he was a student at the New School. I mean, you know, just being in bands and just even for a few minutes playing with some of these guys, it was a good experience, you know.
So the one thing too that I noticed that's been pretty big, that probably got you some exposure, in 2012 you recorded the theme song "Brother Can You Spare a Dime" for the HBO documentary Redemption. Did that pan out pretty well for you for exposure and getting your name out there?
It's tough to say. I'm sure it got out there a little bit, but it didn't. You know, it helped me learn the tune. That's one thing.
Yeah.
You know, it did get played on the Oscars, but it was only for a couple seconds. So I think somebody in Chicago, my brother's wife, might have noticed that it could have been me, because there was some piano while they were, you know, announcing the nominees and stuff like that. But you know, you never know you know, when you get phone calls and stuff like that. But as you know, nothing direct. You know, I learned that song, and that's one of the songs that I played on my Blues for Miles album. So, you know, I mean, everything, you never know exactly where it leads to. You know, that didn't particularly blossom out into. You know, at the time, I thought, hey, I'm doing something for HBO. I'm going to, you know, I have a chance to get all these other gigs, but it's not that simple.
Yeah, no, it's never that simple, for sure. You know, you've been at it a long time. You've had a long, winding road in jazz. When you look back on your career, how do you feel? How do you feel about where you're at today versus where you started at?
Well, I feel pretty good, you know, in the climate of today. I mean, I'm still working. I'm still, you know, I still have a chance to continue to work. You know, I really don't think about any accomplishments or anything like that, because it's always, you know, it's always about, for me, it's about working. It's about, you know, how do I pay the bills, you know, and the fact that I can pay the bills working with music, I guess, is a blessing. It's an accomplishment, but it's always something to strive for. You know, I mean, I've come a long way. I've dealt, you know, as far as, you know, I've had some rough times, you know, with you know, dealing with you know, just the regular stuff that a lot of musicians go through. You know, dealing with substance abuse and homelessness, you know. So in relation to that, you know, I've come a long way, and as far as getting out of that, you know, lifestyle, and you know, because I used to think that, you know, you had to be involved in the street scene, you know, in order to be, you know, to be a good musician, or just to have, you know, I felt you had to have a little dirt on you in order to make things work musically in jazz. But, you know, it's not necessarily true, you know. I mean, we all learn from our experiences, good and bad. But, you know, overall, I feel I'm in a good place today. When I first came to New York, there was a lot more work. There was a lot more opportunities for, you know, young folks like myself, and to travel and to do things. There's not as much work as there was back then. So in light of that, you know, it's an up and down thing, you know. You know, I feel good, and at the same time, I feel I just got to keep working, you know. I got to keep hustling. I mean, I'm very fortunate to know a lot of good musicians and work with a lot of good musicians and have a lot of people that are, you know, helping me out and stuff like that, and vice versa, you know. And to be able to be part of the scene and help kids out, help kids learn how to play, and it's all good. I'm in a good spot.
Right on.
It's not easy though. It's not easy.
No.
I got to tell you that. It's sometimes it's a struggle and sometimes it's frustrating. I never feel like giving up, but sometimes I just feel like cursing out the universe.
Yeah.
which is not helpful because it just comes right back at me. I'm grateful, and I know that I'm very fortunate to be in this position right now. So sometimes I have to just I have to reorient my thinking oftentimes, to realize that I'm to realize that things are going good. Things are going good for me, and when I'm able to help other people, then things are even going better.
So let me ask you a generic question. You've dedicated your life to jazz, so tell me this: why do you love jazz?
Jazz it's the music is healing. The music. As a musician, when I'm doing a good thing, when I'm playing music, it heals me. It makes me feel good. It's something about the music that allows you to let go and communicate directly and be part of something bigger than yourself. It allows me to tap in. It's something about playing on a structure, playing structured music, and then creating on top of that form. It's something about creating where there is no form at all. Jazz has so many aspects to it, and just getting involved with the different rhythmic aspects of jazz and the different styles. Playing bossa nova jazz or straight ahead jazz, or it's so many different forms that you can get into and create on top of those forms. It's really cool, and it's also and when you're doing a good job, it relates to the audience, whether they have musical experience or not, they can feel it. There's something about jazz that gets through to people.
Yeah.
I'm sure other styles of music do that too, but jazz is a little different. It's got. When you're tapped into it and it's working, on a high level, it's something that really comes through a tradition of, a long tradition from Africa, from, blending in with different elements around the world. It's something that's really, it has a lot of history to it, and it's sacred in a sense. It has a lot of history. So in order to do it right, it has to swing. It has to have a feeling, and it's got to have the blues in it. It's got to have, it's got to have a lot of stuff in it in order for it to, for it to work right. And so it's always a challenge to make that, to be in that feeling, when I'm performing or, it's, when I'm listening, it's, when I listen to Coltrane play, impressions or whatever, or whatever song, when he's really into it, it's like, it's a direct channel from somewhere. It's like a healing feeling, I can get energized by just listening to the masters,
Yeah, well, and I want to tap into what you're saying about the rich history of jazz and how far back we've gone and how much there's involved in it. And being here in Kansas City and seeing 18 and Vine, the beginnings of this question is coming from that perspective, which is this: if you could go into a time machine and see a performer, where would you go and who would you see?
I would see Charlie Parker as he was developing in Kansas City. And I read this book, about this guy from this guy, Stanley Crouch, and he's a controversial author, but somebody I've seen over the years, friend of Rashid in the past, and former drummer. He wrote this book called Kansas City Lightning, and that kind of got me interested. It talks about a lot of the periphery around Charlie Parker and how he grew up in the era and what other musicians were like and stuff like that. And Charlie Parker's life was so fascinating, and he was definitely an inspiration. When I was living in New Orleans, I remember this. I was playing on Bourbon Street, and this guy was like, "Why would you want to, go to New York and live in garbage and roll around in trash cans like Charlie Parker. I was like, are you kidding me? And it makes me think about that movie that came out a long time ago called Bird, and it was just totally wrong. It didn't focus on the real deal, which was his genius and how that music, how he developed that music, where it came from, And I would love to see Charlie Parker if I could go back in time and see him playing with some of those local bands at the barbecue shacks and stuff like that. So barbecue from 1935 or whatever.
Absolutely, yeah. Back when it was smoking, yeah, and they're doing pretty good these days. What's one of the nicest things that a fan has ever said to you?
You made my day. You really inspired me, or you sound great, or your band sounds great, or that was, when you make people feel better, that's part of the, that's the reason why I do it, I want to make myself feel better, and when I do that, I can, there's a chance that I can, and then other people can feel better too. So it's about projecting beauty. It's about projecting warmth, compassion, sometimes anger, frustration. It's about expressing emotions and helping. And when people hear that, and when people feel that, they feel energized, or they understand that, okay, this is, it's not all about, peace and serenity. Sometimes it's about anger, frustration, and the will to change, the desire to express those feelings. So, jazz is such a beautiful thing in that you can express emotions inside of the music, and you can sometimes convey that to people. So when people understand that and they feel it, and they say, that was a great concert, or, you did a good thing, then that's what it's all about.
Let me ask you this. This is my final question. Everybody has a version of who you are, your family, your friends, the people that you play for, but when you wake up and go out into the world, who do you think you are?
Just a regular cat trying to get a job, trying to work and be part of, just like a regular guy who goes and I'm just a regular cat, just someone who's going to do a job and also learn. So I'm a perpetual student, I'm a student and I'm a hustler and because I got to keep hustling to get gigs. I'm also a peaceful person. I'm also about inclusion. Everybody has a role to play, and if I can, just help that process and whoever I interact with. I don't know. That's a tough question.
No, you hit it. You hit it. I think you hit it on the head.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah. No, I think you completely described yourself, and the beauty of that answer is that realistically, not to sound cliche, there's not a right answer. It's just who do you think you are? And I think you just summed it up.
That's a great question too.
Yeah, I saved the best for last. Yeah. Who do you think you are? So
just a regular cat trying to do the best he can, and that's it, I guess.
Hustling and feeling the peace. That's good, man. That's good. It's a good yin yang for sure. Hey, Greg, thank you for taking some time out. Thank you for giving me your story. Thank you for the music. I appreciate it.
Hey, thanks, Joe, and hopefully I'll get a chance to see you one of these days.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to yet another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in New York, Chicago, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Greg for his time, his stories, and all that music. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store, or visit the Neon Jazz YouTube channel, and you can always get everything Neon Jazz at the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the music, my friends.
Neon Jazz.